I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods, yeah. One in particular, I'm just a messenger, let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Mock Draft Monday, and we are going to live up to that billing. We just started a 3-round rookie SuperFlex mock that's going to pop up on the screen in just a few minutes. But before we get to that, I am joined today by Dennis. How are things in Ohio?
Man, it's cold as hell in Ohio. I had to drive up to Mansfield today, and it was snowing up there in the mountains of Ohio. It was crazy. I came into my studio. It was warm last week. I turned off my ambient heat. It's like 50 degrees in here right now. It's good for my arthritis, but I don't know.
We're enjoying like our last big warm day before the weather's supposed to turn. So it's like 80 degrees today. Not that I've experienced much. My first day back in the office after vacation was just about what you'd expect your first day back in the office after vacation. I saw my desk a lot. I didn't see a lot of anything else. But we are happy that you are joining us. Matt is off today. If you've been watching him, he's been covering the Elite 11. So if you want to get some Elite 11 hot scoop, head to campustocanton.com and you'll be able to see some videos and articles that he posted there. He will be back with us on Friday. But for now, are you ready for this draft?
Man, I am ready. I took the back end so I could sort of get a feel for how the board was going to fall.
Yep. So you can see we went ahead and got started. I set the timer at 5 minutes. We put it out there. A big thanks to everybody that jumped in to participate in the mock. I kicked things off at the 101. I took Breece Hall. This is a super flex mock. I would probably take Hall regardless of the format. I think he kind of established himself there after the combine as kind of the clear number one running back. I feel like even though it's super flex, that felt like a better pick to me. But what do you think about my decision there?
Yeah, he's kind of becoming the default. He did what we expected at the combine. He ran fast. He caught the ball well. He looks strong. He's got good size. I'm not concerned with whether or not he'll land somewhere that's going to be detrimental to him. He's coming out. He's the number one guy in the class for fantasy. And didn't like that Pickett pick there.
Apparently.
Yeah. So, but no, I love Breece Hall. I think he's going to be a stud, and he's kind of like 90% of Jonathan Taylor is how I feel, because when you see him run and you look at him, he kind of has that same look, but it's really hard to sort of say anybody's Jonathan Taylor-esque. I think you'll catch a lot of flack when you start making those kinds of comparisons. Then we had Halsey go off the board with Malik Willis. It's a super flex. So the best quarterback in the draft went at 2. So I think that's kind of how it's going to fall pretty much in every draft. There'll be some people I think that, may decide to go wide receiver. I don't think another quarterback is going to surpass Willis just because of Willis's ceiling. He may be a lot more raw than some of the other guys, but you're drafting on the potential there with Malik Willis.
Yeah, and so I agree. I think he's kind of settled in to be the top quarterback prospect. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a team like Carolina or somebody take him early. He might have if he ends up in the right spot, he might end up starting early for you. But that seems like that's kind of settling in to be the top quarterback. And then I think we're seeing this seems to be I think the ADP on this is not rating that I put it on a rookie draft, but it seems like this is a stronger wide receiver draft, and so you're seeing that Garrett Wilson, Drake London go 3-4. What do you think about the pickups there?
I think they're probably going to be the top guys, though. I'm starting to come back around on Treylon Burks. I'm admittedly team big wide receiver, and he is the guy. Him and London are the two guys that sort of fit that mold here. Are Burks and London. So I don't hate it. I think I'm starting to come back around to, if I don't get Wilson, I'm probably going Burks over London right now at that point. But I'm really into Kenny Walker as well. I don't know if I'd take another quarterback maybe until, like, we had Sam Howell went at 108. At 7 or 8, I think is probably where I'm going to start looking at the second quarterback off the board. See, we had after London, it went Pickett, Kenny Walker, Jamison Williams, Sam Howell. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. This quarterback class, I feel like, kind of has split people and polarized people just a little bit. I have been up and down on Pickett. I've kind of slid him back, but at the same time, it seems like what you're hearing is he will end up being a guy that goes in the first round. And if he gets that kind of draft capital, I can see, taking him somewhere up here. But, this is it feels quite a different situation than when the SuperFlex drafts last year. You never really went a draft without seeing the big 5 quarterbacks go somewhere in the first round, usually in the top 9 or 10 picks. If you managed to get a Mac Jones, was usually the 5th down there. If you managed to get him at the turn at 12 or 11, you felt like it was a victory. This year, it does feel like you have a better chance. There's probably 6 quarterbacks that are worth considering. It feels like you have a better chance of getting someone in the second round. It's also interesting with running backs. I would be curious to see how this group views running backs once we get past Hall, Walker, and Spiller. We've seen Hall and Walker go. Spiller's still out there. A lot of receivers still out there. Actually, I just better check the updated pick.
Yeah, I like I like Spiller. Okay, I'm sitting here at 111. Treylon Burks and Chris Olave went 9 and 10. I kind of moved back. I took 11. I wanted to see if I could get Burks to fall to me there because he has been falling a lot. But like I said, I think he's starting to make his way back up the board. From a quarterback perspective, I'm Howell over Pickett. I like Sam Howell's game. They both started a lot of games in college. They bring a lot of the same types of tools to the game. I don't know. Howell is kind of my guy in this draft. I am starting to come around on Desmond Ridder and Matt Corral. So I think, I'm in 20 dynasty leagues and most of them are SuperFlex. So I think I'll find myself starting to sort of, diversify my picks in the back half of the first, early second. So I think I'll get some shares of all of the quarterbacks in that range. So sitting here, recapping, we got Breece Hall, Malik Willis, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Kenny Pickett, Kenneth Walker, Jamison Williams. Williams is rising. he was really good. I think he's, JWAC has got him at the top of his list there. And I think he's probably pretty happy getting Jameson Williams at 107 as the third wide receiver when that's his first wide receiver in his rankings, I believe. But sitting here, let's see, where did I leave off? Williams, then Sam Howell, Treylon Burks, Chris Olave. So for me, really, it's kind of Isaiah Spiller, Matt Corral, George Pickens. Those are probably the guys I'm looking at right now. I feel like Kyron Williams is starting to rise back up. He showed out well at his pro day. Somebody questioned, I'm in another mock draft that's a slow draft, and I took Kyron at the 204, and somebody was pretty surprised that I went that high with him. But I think as my RB5, I'm okay with Williams being there. I'm going to stick with the quarterback here and go with Matt Corral. I think that, it is a super flex draft this late. Pickens has some injury concerns. Spiller, he's not as fast as I think we thought he was. And I'm going to take the shot in a super flex here on Matt Corral.
Yeah, and I think that's a pick that makes sense. Usually if you're picking at the end of a round, unless you traded in there, presumably your team did well before. So you can usually absorb having a little bit of a time, if a Corral goes somewhere and doesn't start right away, to build some depth. Hopefully, you can patch over that. George Pickens goes, a pretty good pick. Isaiah Spiller still on the board. It kind of surprises me a little bit that we haven't seen all of the top three running backs go in the first round. What do you think about that?
I'm sorry, I was reading a comment. What'd you say?
I said it surprised me a little bit that we haven't seen Spiller go yet, because in most of the mocks and things I've looked at, the top three running backs go somewhere in the first round.
Yeah, I think Pickens is starting to rise. He probably would have went if I had not taken Matt Corral. I kind of feel like that kind of threw the monkey wrench into it. I don't know, I'm not quite as high on Olave as others, so it wouldn't have surprised me to see Spiller go over Olave, Corral, or Pickens at this point.
So we have a couple of comments. Joseph Pellegrino put Howell as QB1. I am on the clock, so they're waiting for me to pick.
Justin wants you to not make him take Spiller.
Yeah. I am. I agree with this too, Debbie Forum. Spiller is a big time faller. Never would have fallen to second pre-combine. That's probably true. It does seem like the combine really boosted Breece Hall and hurt probably Spiller the most. For me, if you're picking at 101, I got Breece Hall to start. Usually, if you're picking at the top of the draft again, unless you traded into it, you probably don't have a great team. And in Superflex, that usually means you need quarterback help. I'm actually going to go with Desmond Ridder here. He's a guy that I kind of like. Maybe I've spent too much time with Bruning, but I feel like he's a guy that if he gets drafted into the right situation could have a chance to play. It's probably the best of the quarterbacks that are left and feels like the right move there.
Yeah, I would agree. It's Spiller. So Kyron Williams is a little bit ahead of the curve when it compares to Isaiah Spiller. Williams is kind of settling back into his pre-combine ranking, and I think Spiller is going to do the same as the pre-draft process continues to play out. I think he'll move back up into the first round. I do think he's RB3 in this class. I was listening to the Dynasty Nerds podcast last week, and I think it might have been I forget which one of them said, but basically there's three tiers of one to start off the running back rankings. There's Breece Hall, he's a tier. There's Kenneth Walker, he's a tier. There's Isaiah Spiller in a tier, and then then you've got a group of guys that make up tier number 4. And I feel like that is probably accurate. Kenneth Walker just seems to run with a lot more power compared to Spiller. Spiller's a little upright when he runs. He is a little bit bigger. I mean, Walker's only 5'9.5". So.
Yeah. So when we see Isaiah Spiller does go right after me, I'm sorry, Halsey, I didn't go with the double running back stack. It was tempting, but then so he picks up Spiller. What do you think of the top two? You know, usually teams picking at the top of the draft are teams that need help. Both of us have a running back and a quarterback. How do you think that's played out?
Well, you got the better running back and he got the better quarterback. So it's tough because when you're rebuilding, ideally you probably are looking at wide receivers, just because the shelf life is so much longer. But I don't think there's a wide receiver that warrants going that high. I think the 3, 4, 5 range, I'm sure there'll be some drafts out there that have, probably Garrett Wilson or maybe even Jamison Williams or Treylon Burks if they continue to rise back up to their to the earlier rankings. But it's just you have to take the best players. I was listening. I mentioned earlier I had to drive up to Mansfield, and I was listening to Jeff Erickson on the radio, and he said, "Look, when you draft." What did he say? When you draft for need instead of taking the best available player, you create situations where you're continuing to have to draft for need. So I would probably I don't hate either one of these. I think both of them are good with Hall and Ritter or Willis and Spiller. I think those are both nice starts to a rookie draft.
What's going to be interesting to me with these running backs is to see where they end up landing, because a lot of the teams that felt like they were kind of obvious in need of running backs where it might have been a good spot through free agency may have not gotten, a great bell cow back, but have put in so many running backs that would kind of make you nervous. Like in Atlanta, they added Damian Williams. They still have Mike Davis. They added back Cordero Patterson. Miami went and got Mostert and Edmonds to add to Gaskin and Salvon Ahmed. Those are a couple places pre-free agency that I would thought, oh man, if they get if they go for one of these running backs, that'd be a great spot. But is there spots that you would like to see some of these guys fall?
Atlanta could use a running back, and they've got, Patterson is a nice story, but he's 31, 32 years old. Damian Williams is 30 years old now, but they're not really a team that is in a position to start building, to start competing. They're undergoing a significant rebuild. So taking a running back early, before probably the third round, is probably not a great move. I think Seattle could probably use one. I don't know if Carson's going to come back off that neck injury. That makes me nervous to the point where, I won't even draft him right now. I just don't know what's happening there. And then Rashad Penny, as much as I'm a Penny truther and I want to believe, man, it was 5 games is all it was. It was just 5 amazing games. And I just don't know if I can trust him any more than I can trust Pete Carroll. It was a nice story for James Conner in Arizona, but I don't know if he's got if his durability issues are gonna be behind him. So there's not a lot of places to go where a running back is gonna have a clear path to opportunity. I think some will step up and take a role and carve it out just by being better in practice. But I don't know that there's anywhere I say I want a running back to lay in there pretty much other than Atlanta or Texas. Yeah. Houston's another one.
I know it seemed like Houston was kicking the tires on your old buddy from the Colts, Marlon Mack.
Oh, yeah.
But we'll see where that goes. So I mentioned Spiller went at 202, then Christian Watson 203, Sky Moore, whose stock really rose, another riser from the combine, went 2-4. Jahan Dotson at 2-5. Trey McBride, our first tight end, off the board at 2-6. Damon Pierce at 2-7 went Jared took him. Justin Ross, another interesting one. He's kind of coming off some injuries. Be curious to see where he ends up going in the draft, but he goes at 208 for us. Then Rashad White at 29. Was it James Cook? I forgot to look.
Yeah.
I think it's James Cook, 210. Yep. And then now you are on the clock. So what are you thinking with your second pick? You took Matt Corral with 111.
Well, my second pick is made for me. I was talking earlier about the post-draft stuff kind of coming into play. Now we're catching back up. So for me, Kyron Williams is going to be the guy. But before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and hop on this DraftKings read. College basketball fans, join the action on the court during the biggest tournament of the year with DraftKings Sportsbook. Turn your team's victory into your own big win. New customers can bet $5 on any team to win and get $200 in free bets if they do. It's that simple. If they win, you win. If Sportsbook isn't available in your state, you can still join in the college pool or college hoops action with DraftKings Pools. Everyone can play free pools all March long for a shot at a share of over $250,000 in prizes. Simply join a pool, answer questions like, who will make the next round? Who will hit the most three-pointers? And then track your results. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code TPPN. Bet $5 on any college hoops team to win and get $200 in free bets if they do. If they win, you win with promo code TPPN this week at DraftKings Sportsbook. 21 and older, restrictions apply. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, crisis counseling and referral services can be accessed by calling 1-800-GAMBLER, 1-800-426-2537. Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Wyoming. 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona. 1-800-522-4700 in Colorado and New Hampshire. 888-789-7777. Visit http://ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. 1-877-770-STOP. That's 1-877-770-7867 in Louisiana. 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. That's 467-369 in New York. Visit opgr.org in Oregon. Call or text the Tennessee Red Line, 1-800-889-9789 in Tennessee, or 1-888-532-3500 in Virginia, 21 or older, 18 or older in New Hampshire and Wyoming, physically present in Arizona, Colorado, Connecticut, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, Michigan, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Wyoming only. Minimum $5 deposit required. Eligibility restrictions apply. See http://DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Now, where'd my guy go? There it is.
Debbie to Dynasty is enjoying his picks from the 9th spot, Treylon Burks and Rashad White. Pretty good in there.
All right, so I took Kyron Williams. At 211, I'll take Kyron Williams every day.
So almost done with the second round. Oh, now we are Zamir White. So obviously, talked about there's probably only 6 quarterbacks you would at this point in time, unless something fun happens at the NFL draft, that I would consider. The last of those, Carson Strong, still on the board here at 301, but I already took Desmond Ridder. I took Breece Hall. I am going to go ahead and go with wide receiver David Bell.
I was considering Bell because, again, he's another faller, but he was a great producer in college, and there's a spot in the NFL for a guy that can get open, even if he runs a 4.6 40 at a wide receiver. And Bell is a good size guy. He's not real small. He's over 6 foot, over 200 pounds. If Williams wouldn't have been there and James Cook wouldn't have been there, then Bell would have probably been my pick.
Yeah, it does work out, the way some of these things are falling. It's interesting to see how different people are appraising this. I feel like we're at the point in time kind of in this process where you're used to the values that you have and maybe the people you spend the most time with. Matt and I have been doing mock drafts and rookie mock drafts together for almost 2 months now. So I feel like I have an incredible idea of what he thinks and what some of the Campus to Canton guys think because of the Slack in there that we're in together and looking at what they have. And it's been interesting to see how other people are appraising things. And that's really, for me, when you end up doing your own rookie draft, you come in with this idea of where everyone's supposed to go. And it's about a little bit about reading the people that you're drafting with.
It's very much about that. If you know your league, like I think people in drafts, like in rookie drafts, people knew that it was going to have to be really, really late for me to draft Will Fuller. I was vocal about that. I just didn't think he could catch the ball. He's got terrible hands, which is crazy when you think about my love for Marquez Valdez-Scantling. It seems like they're the same guy, just a couple inches different in height. But for whatever reason, man, I just couldn't buy into Fuller. But this draft, for all it's kind of made out to be not a great draft. Looking at Big Cat at 3, he got Garrett Wilson, who's going to be a really, really good receiver at the NFL level. He can separate. Christian Watson, who is a Marquez Valdez-Scantling clone. Unless he shakes off his drops, he's going to be that guy that does that. Big, tall, fast, with questionable hands. And then Brian Robinson, there's some people starting to come around on Robinson. He kind of came into the combine as your quintessential plotter. He looked good at the Senior Bowl, but, he's 37 years old. He's been playing the game for a while. He's chiseled. He looks like and he's big. He was one of the biggest backs. But he's starting to catch a little bit of momentum right now, so he can play well. So coming out with Wilson, Watson, and Robinson, you could end up – I don't think Robinson is quite at the level athletically of, say, James Conner, but I could see him kind of being that kind of back, a tough, punishing runner that might rack up some touchdowns and, be a 900-yard rusher with volume.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm to the point, too, where I'm getting kind of excited to see where some of these players land, where they get taken in the draft. Do they go higher than we're expecting? Do they go lower than we're expecting? It seems like, a lot of the mock drafts I've looked at and a lot of the ones we've done, you don't really see running backs going up in the first couple of rounds. So where do guys end up falling? I think we're probably in for a huge wide receiver run in the first round, especially with some of the player movement that's bounced around. You would figure Green Bay, will go against their nature and use at least one of their first round picks to get a receiver. I would still think even after the signings they made, Kansas City would want to get one. We know the Jets have really been trying to get in the market to pull a wide receiver. If they don't pull one there, are they a candidate to get one at 210? Houston probably a candidate. So it's going to be fascinating to see where some of these guys land. I think we could end up with quite a few receivers going in the first and second rounds of the draft.
Where has John Mechie been going in your drafts you've been doing?
Rookie drafts? Matt,
or even the NFL drafts you've been doing. Have you been going deep enough that Mechie makes it in?
No, we've been doing 2 rounds for both formats, and I think I took him once late in the second round, but of the NFL mocks that we've done, but Matt has him quite a bit lower in his rankings, so I think that's probably why he hasn't gone as often.
Yeah, I felt like he was going to get a lot more buzz than he has, but he seems to after I think he got injured right in the
Yeah,
at the
I'm
end
pretty
of the
sure.
season, and then he just hasn't garnered the same type of buzz as somebody like a Drake London, and he was having a really good season. So I think he's somebody that we might be sleeping on both in the NFL draft and in rookie drafts. It's interesting. The Nuggets took two tight ends, Trey McBride and Jelani Woods, in the second and the third round. My struggle with tight ends is they just aren't quite they don't produce soon enough. And I know it's dynasty. We got to be patient, and everybody wants to get the next Kyle Pitts. But they're just sort of like Woods is so tall. Is he an enigma because he's so tall and athletic? Everybody wants that basketball player turned tight end, and then McBride, he's just barely 6'4", I think. That's not very big. So it's like the opposite end of the spectrum. It'll be interesting to see. I struggle. I've started to fall into the habit of I don't really draft a tight end. I wait a couple years till they're in the NFL, and then I kind of roll the dice. The downside of it is I don't very often end up with guys like Mark Andrews or Travis Kelce, because I'm not drafting them very early. I'm not drafting them in rookie drafts, and I'm a little late to the table when it comes to trading for them in established leagues. So I end up with a lot of guys like, Robert Tonyan and whatnot like that. This year, David Njoku seems to be my guy.
John Mechie tore his ACL in the SEC championship game, so that was in December. It might be a little bit of the reason why he slid a little bit. You would think in that range of time, maybe he's ready at the beginning of the season, maybe not. We've seen that's not too far off the range of time when Chris Godwin tore his ACL, and I know there's been some question about whether he'll be ready to come back. Debbie Dynasty liked David Bell at the third round ADP. I did too. I was a little surprised he fell there, and I guess I wasn't the only one that caught your description of Brian Robinson as being 37 years old.
Just call him like I see him. No, and honestly, so if we apply the hashtag 2 to 3 year window to running backs, being an older running back, as long as they're talented, doesn't really matter. In Dynasty, with few exceptions, the running back position is all about the first contract. We want running backs on their first contract. When they're getting close to the end of the first contract, year 3, year 4, we're shipping them off and going younger running back in Dynasty if we're being successful. So I'm not getting overly wrapped up if I've got a running back coming out of college at 22, 23 years old, if he's been very productive. Now, Robinson was productive last year, but the other 4 years he was in college, he wasn't very productive. Now, Alabama's put a lot of running backs into the NFL, and by and large, you don't get a huge workload. They tend to spread it out because they get so many talented backs. But I would have liked to have seen Robinson get a little more work early in his career than he did. That would make me feel a little more comfortable. But in the third, fourth round, I'm okay taking a shot on Robinson.
Yeah, and we saw I saw too Carson Strong, probably the sixth quarterback off the board last, all the way to 3.7. Be curious to see kind of where he lands in the NFL draft. Could end up being great value. Could end up, being a guy you don't see play. And then another guy who I think fell a little bit after the combine and the measurements, Wan'Dale Robinson, goes at 3.8. What did you think of that value?
It could be good. I mean, I'm probably not going to take him before that. He measured so much smaller. I mean, it's one thing to fudge it by an inch or two. Drake London was listed at 6'5". He checked in at 6'3.5". That's something. But Robinson was listed at 5'11" and checked in at barely 5'8". That's a big drop off. I think he feels like a slot receiver, productive guy, a Cole Beasley type with a little bit of speed to him as well. But I don't know if he's feels like he's destined to have a low end wide receiver 3 ceiling, but be more so in that wide receiver 4 range consistently. It could. I mean, we've seen some smaller guys like Antonio Brown come out and have long productive stretches. So, it's not terrible, but there's a lot of those kind of guys in this draft. Jahan Dotson, Sky Moore, they're not very big. Chris Olave. It'll be interesting. Even Garrett Wilson, I think he's just barely. Him and Olave are both just barely 6 foot.
Well, we're getting close to the finish of our 3 rounds that we're going to do, and now you are back up on the clock. Do you want to give a recap of a couple picks before you?
Yeah, we had after Wan'Dale Robinson, then Keontae Ingram and Kevin Harris went. Ingram might be a surprise. He can catch the ball pretty well. He's a big back. He transferred to USC, and he was productive. So he's a guy that I could see coming in as a later round pick, 4th, 5th, maybe even 6th round pick, and being a Chris Carson type, but with a little better hands, sort of moving into a guy that shows up to camp, just puts on his helmet and goes to work. And by the time they start the real games, he's playing 50, 60% of the snaps. And people are wondering, where did this guy come from? Kevin Harris, he's a little different story. He's at South Carolina. He's a bruising back, 2-down guy. I don't think he catches the ball terribly well, but he is a guy that could establish himself as a short yardage, goal line, 2-down back. And if he can protect the quarterback, we like to get wrapped up on running backs that catch the ball. But I think we saw the last couple of years in Dallas, for instance, and while Zeke can catch the ball real well, that it's every bit as important to be able to protect your quarterback on 3rd down as it is to be able to catch the ball. Actually, probably a better example of that is Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette. While Fournette catches the ball well, Fournette also protects his quarterback really well. And Jones has blown enough blocks that it is that they don't like to have him in there on 3rd down. I was kind of hoping that the Carson Strong hate would be, pun intended, strong with this group, and he would fall to me at 11. Well, I know I took Matt Corral early. If I'm going with the best player available sometimes in a SuperFlex, I might take a shot on a second quarterback just to see if I can hit lightning in a bottle and catch a couple good ones. What I'm looking at here, we've got Alec Pierce, Cincinnati, 6'3", 211, speedster. Jerome Ford, another Cincinnati guy, 5'10", almost 220, transferred out of Alabama because he wasn't getting playing time. It's kind of the opposite of Brian Robinson. Robinson stayed, Ford left. Ford got a lot of playing time. Jalen Tolbert, I think he's South Alabama, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Let me look.
6 foot, 6'1", good size. But I'm probably going to go out of this group. It really, for me, it comes down to Alec Pierce and Jerome Ford. And I'm going to apply the theory I was reading the other day, and I wish I could remember who was talking about it so I could appropriately credit them, but I was just reading it in passing. And the theory was that late fantasy drafted running backs have a better hit rate than late fantasy wide receivers. I don't know how late a third round is. Most of my drafts are 5, some even 6 rounds. But I'm going to go Jerome Ford. I like his speed. He doesn't have a lot of wiggle to his game. But he's a good running back. He's a tough runner inside. He can catch the ball fairly well. And I think that if I'm going to kind of stack up some positions late, grabbing at the end of the third round, grabbing a running back like Jerome Ford is a good opportunity.
And you were right. Jalen Tolbert is South Alabama. Well,
even a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while.
And we get, is it Pierre Strong? Pierce Strong?
Pierre Strong out of South
Pierre
Dakota.
Strong. To wrap it up. So that gives us all of the picks. I'm going to let that take full screen so that everyone can see it a little bit bigger. But what do you think of the draft overall? Only 2 tight ends go. Both went to the same guy. What do you think of this tight end class?
I think there's a lot of potential, but I don't know. Again, you have to be patient with it. It's going to Antoine Pierce. I mean, Alec Pierce?
I thought it was Alec Pierce too, but hold on.
Well,
I'm prepared to be wrong.
Yeah, I'm not. The tight end class is going to be weird. You know, Wiedermeyer being as slow and unathletic as he was in testing, people are going to have to put that aside and really look at the game tape of him. You know, I know we've got a lot of game tape in the Dynasty Nerds film room, and it ends up sometimes people just don't measure well. We've seen occasionally somebody will overcome their athletic limitations and perform well at an NFL level. Not often, but it can happen. But we've also seen guys like late career Jason Witt put up good numbers. And so, you know, there's and he was by no stretch an athletic miracle at the end of his career. So for me, there's one guy out there that I keep missing that I've seen in some NFL mocks, but not necessarily. I know, not necessarily in. I'm just kidding, Joseph Pellegrino. I'm just kidding.
Joseph's really happy that this wasn't his actual draft. It seems like he got sniped in every round.
Sometimes it's like that. But now I lost my train of thought talking to the viewers and the participants. Oh, well. Getting old is rough.
Indeed. So how do you feel about you went out of the 11th spot? Let's say you were in the 11th spot. You end up with Matt Corral, Kyron Williams, and Jerome Ford. Feeling good?
I actually do like that draft. With this draft being a little more talented at the wide receiver position, I wouldn't have minded getting some exposure at that position. But it really came down to Pickens and his injuries versus Corral and his production at the college level is kind of really where it fell for me. And since it was a SuperFlex draft, I did go with the quarterback over the wide receiver. I do think Pickens is going to have a really good year or a really good career. He's got a lot of ability. Um, Kyron Williams, like I said, I feel like he's an early second round guy. And by the time our actual drafts roll around, unless somebody catches him kicking a puppy or something, I don't think we're going to see him at the end of the second round.
Yeah, and I'm pretty happy with my draft too. Brees Hall was kind of a no-brainer for me at 101, but then for Ritter and Bell, it probably I'll feel either good or less good depending on the situations that they fall in, because I think both have a chance that could contribute or could end up buried somewhere. Is there any other ones of the drafts that really kind of stand out to you?
So it looked like JWAC kind of went with his guy draft. I think Jamison Williams fallen to him, and then Damian Pierce. I know that they've talked about. He's talked about both of those guys. Carson Strong to me is, he's like the second coming of Matt Ryan. If I'm comparing him, he's not very mobile. Good pocket mobility, but because of his injury history, he's definitely not gonna run. But he's got a good arm and he reads defenses pretty well. I think, but I think that his fantasy ceiling is going to be fairly limited, unless he ends up on a team that just chucks the ball a ton. I like the Treylon Burks, Rashad White, Keontae Ingram draft from Matt Cooper. I thought that one was good. I want to like Zamir White. I really do. But I feel like in the NFL, he's going to struggle to hold on to the ball. I feel like his hands are as small as mine, maybe smaller. And I don't have very big hands. And I feel like that might be an issue for him. How about you? Whose draft stands out to you?
Yeah, Pellegrino's draft at 1-8 feels like an incredible upside draft. Howell, I like Howell too. It's hard to get a feel for where he ends up, but if he ends up in a good situation, could end up really delivering, which could be fun. Justin Ross, a guy we saw early in his college career have production struggle with some injuries, but if he can bounce back healthy and find some place to get used, probably the same with Wan'Dale Robinson, measured pretty small, but if you get in the right system with the creative person that finds a way to get him the ball, it could work out. Obviously we saw last year didn't work out with kind of a similar profiled player. Matt talked about Rondale Moore. That had been kind of a hope for him, and it didn't seem like Arizona could figure out how to use him. So that's an interesting one to me. I liked the 102 also. Halsey, getting Willis, probably the top quarterback prospect, and then I think he ends up with pretty decent value with where Spiller falls. He's a guy that we talked about before the combine. A lot of people had him as their number one running back and kind of the top spot overall, and it seems like he really slid back a little bit, just almost by not performing there, by not participating.
Right. Well, oftentimes, they'll go to the combine and perform fair to middling, then they'll go to their pro day and do well. So he started off poor at the combine and then said, "Hey, I'm done." And then he went to his pro day and still kind of sucked at his pro day. So I think he'll be fine. I do think he's going to be the third running back off the board. And it may work in his favor that he gets an opportunity to go somewhere that's better for him. So.
Well, I want to give a big shout out and a thanks to the 10 of you guys that jumped into the mock. It's always fun to get in there and start getting a feel. Draft season is almost upon us. The NFL draft is literally, I think it's literally a month away, right? It starts April 28th.
I think so, yeah.
So we are literally 1 month from today, which is pretty exciting. But any closing thoughts on the...
Well, let's tell them about the Dynasty GM. I know a lot of these guys already know about it, but Do you want to dominate your Dynasty League? The Dynasty GM from dynastynerds.com is the tool you need to get the job done. It integrates seamlessly with your MFL, Sleeper, Flea Flicker, and FFPC leagues. Use the league analyzer to identify your team's strengths and weaknesses. Use the trade calculator to put together league-winning deals. The player shares tracker to keep track of your rostership. Get exclusive rankings and more. Use code ROUNDTABLE, that's all one word, ROUNDTABLE, for 15% off the monthly or annual subscription. Bundle it with the Dynasty GM. Bundle the Dynasty GM with the Nerd Herd to save even more.
All right. Well, that's going to bring it to a close here for Mock Draft Monday. Hopefully, we will get maybe another mock draft of some sort in next Monday. On Friday, Matt should be back.
Next Monday, we have Eric Moody from ESPN on.
That's right. I forgot. And so we will be mock asking questions. But there are several Mondays between now and the draft and afterward. But we should be back on Friday, and knowing the way this NFL offseason has gone, I wouldn't be surprised if the Atlanta Falcons just trade their entire roster to the Saints or something like that. But we will see what kind of NFL news comes, probably a little deep dive into some more of the prospects. Until then, have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.